In this video, we are going to discuss mankind's earliest serial killers on record. We will only be discussing the first 10. According to Wikipedia, serial killers before 1600. There's another section that shows legendary serial killers, and some of those killers on that list surpass, or shall I say, are earlier than some of the killers I'm going to mention in this video. But I will not include them because those serial killers, the existence of them is dubious and contradicts the accepted historical record. So it's questionable and doubtful if those people actually existed, so they will not be included for the sake of historical accuracy. The list can be found by typing in serial killers before 1900. Go to Wikipedia and click on before 1600. Go up to the top, and then from there you get the earliest serial killers that we have. Jill Garnier, executed 18th January 1573. He was a French serial killer, cannibal, and hermit, convicted of being a werewolf. He was alternately known as the Hermit of Saint Bonnet and the Werewolf of Dole. The Werewolf of Dole was a reclusive hermit living outside the town of Dole in the province in France, Franche-Comté. He had been recently married and moved his new wife out to his isolated home. Being unaccustomed to the feeding more than just himself, he found it difficult to provide for his wife, causing discontent between them. During this period, several children went missing or were found dead, and the authorities of the Franche-Comté province issued an edict encouraging and allowing the people to apprehend and kill the werewolf responsible. One evening, a group of workers traveled from a neighboring town and came upon what they thought in the dim light to be a wolf, but some recognized as the hermit with the body of a dead child. Soon after, Gilles de Garnier was arrested. Confession. According to his testimony, Garnier was in the forest hunting one night, trying to find food for himself and his wife. A ghost appeared to him and offered to ease his troubles, and gave him an ointment that allowed him to change into the form of a wolf, making it easier to hunt. Garnier was convicted of stalking and murdering at least 4 children between the ages of 9 to 12, which he confessed. More than 50 witnesses stated that he had attacked and killed children in the fields and the vineyards, devouring their raw flesh. He was sometimes seen in human shape. Peter Neers, 1540, 16th September 1581. He was a German serial killer and bandit who was executed on September 16th, 1581, in Neumarkt der Afras, 40 kilometers from Nuremberg. Based on his confession, extracted from him and his accomplices under torture, he was convicted of 544 murders, including 24 fetuses cut out of pregnant women. The fetal remains were to be used in magical rituals. He was believed to be an extremely powerful black magician with many supernatural abilities and for acts of cannibalism. It is unknown whether he actually did kill 544 people or whether this was just a confession under torture. In the bathhouse, a cooper recognized him, and they thought he might indeed be this wanted killer. When they checked his bag, they found in his sack there were several hands and hearts from murdered fetuses. The townspeople reacted quickly, and a force of 8 men was gathered to apprehend Peter Neers. He was tortured and executed over the course of 3 days in September 1581. The first day, strips of flesh were torn from his body, and heated oil was poured into his wounds. On the second day, his feet were smeared with heated oil, then held above glowing coal, thereby roasting him. On the third day, he was dragged to a place of execution and broken on the wheel. The wheel was slammed down upon him 42 times. Peter Stump, 1535 to 1589. He was a German serial killer and farmer accused of werewolfery, witchcraft, and cannibalism. He was known as the Werewolf of Bedburg. In 1589, he had one of the most famous werewolf trials of history. He was being stretched on a rack, and before further torture commenced, he confessed to having practiced black magic since he was 12 years old. He claimed that the devil had given him a magical belt or girdle, which enabled him to metamorphose into the likeness of a greedy, devouring wolf, strong and mighty, with eyes great and large, which in the night sparkled like fire, a mouth great and wide, with most sharp and cruel teeth, a huge body, and mighty paws. Removing the belt, he said, made his transformation back into his human form. No such belt was ever found after his arrest. For 25 years, he gorged into the flesh of goats, lambs, and sheep, as well as men, women, and children. Being threatened under torture, he confessed to killing and eating 14 children, 2 pregnant women, whose fetuses he ripped from their wombs and ate their hearts, taunting hot and raw. One of the 14 children was his own son, whose brain he was reported to have devoured. He was not only accused of being a serial murderer and cannibal, but also having incestuous relationships with his daughter, who was sentenced to die with him. The execution of Stump on October 31st, 1589. Halloween. Anyway, alongside his daughter, Sybil, and mistress Catherine, he is one of the most brutal on record. He was put to a wheel where his flesh was torn from his body in 10 places with red-hot pincers, followed by his arms and legs. Then his limbs were broken with the blunt side of an axe head to prevent him from returning from the grave. Before he was beheaded, his body was burned on a pyre. His daughter and mistress had already been flayed and strangled, and were burned along with Stump's body. As a warning against similar behavior, local authorities erected a pole with a torture wheel and the figure of a wolf on it. At the very top, they placed Peter Stump's severed head. Gilles de Rais. Date of birth is unknown. His death date is October 26, 1440. He was a leader in the French army and a companion in terms of Joan of Arc. He is best known for his reputation and later conviction as a confessed serial killer of children. It was during the 100 Years' War. for which he was appointed Marshal of France. In 1434 or 1435 was when he retired from military life, and he depleted his wealth by staging an extravagant theatrical spectacle of his own composition. He was accused of dabbling in the occult. After 1432, Ray was accused of engaging in a series of child murders, with the victims possibly numbering in the hundreds. The killings came to the end of 1440, when a violent dispute with a clergyman led to an eschatological investigation that brought the crimes to light and attributed them to Ray. At his trial, the parents of the missing children in the surrounding area and Ray's own confederates in crime testified against him. He was condemned to death and hanged at Nantes on October 26, 1440. Ray is believed to be the inspiration for the French folk tale Bluebeard, which is earliest recorded in 1697. I previously done some digging onto this man more than the others, and not from what Wikipedia just says, but he was burned alive while hanging, and he would torture his victims and behead them. Most of them were boys, some girls, but a good majority of them, mostly like maybe 80% of them, were boys. An account from his servants said that they watched him molest and rape the young boys. What Wikipedia further didn't mention is he inherited many castles from his dead relatives, and he was finally caught when the authorities found the many naked bodies of young boys in his castle. Alice Kittler, birth date was 1263, and death date was later than 1325. It is unknown. The first witch on record, the Witch of Kilkenny, Hebrew, Norman. Noblewoman prosecuted in the first modern witch trial in the British Isles for the alleged poisoning of her 4 husbands, heresy and witchcraft. She fled to England for her ultimate fate unknown. Her servant was tortured and burned at the stake in her place. The years of her crimes were 1302 to 1324. Shannatyr was a Himyaritic king who ruled Yemen for 27 years. He was not from the royal family. He was known as the man with earrings. He is known as one of the first serial killers. As by this list, of course. Anyway, he lured young boys from the royal family into his home with the promise of food and money, stripped them naked, and sodomized them. He then killed them by throwing them naked out an upper-story window of his home. He was only stopped by when a would-be victim named Zara stabbed him in the anus. Following his assassination, Shannatyr's decapitated head was displayed from the palace window, and Nawaz assumed rulership of the Himyaritic kingdom. Locusta of Gaul. Locusta died at age 69. She was a notorious maker of poisons in the 1st century Roman Empire, active in the final 2 reigns of Julio-Claudian dynasty. She supposedly took part in the assassinations of Claudius and Briticus. She was a favorite of Emperor Nero for several years, and Nero had her provide training to other poisoners in his service. Following Nero's death, Locusta was executed by his successor, Galba. Queen Anula of An-Nua-Dapora. Anula poisoned her son and 4 husbands before holding the throne as Queen Regnant, the equivalent of a king, for 5 years, after which she was overthrown and burned alive. Liu Pengli was the Prince of Zhejiang and was a 2nd century BC Han prince. He is one of the earliest serial killers attested by historical sources. Liu was a prince of Zhejiang in the 6th year of the Middle Era of Emperor Jing of Han. Him and slaves attacked civilians in his lands during the night, and they killed over 100. The court advised the emperor to execute him, but he could not stand to see his own nephew be executed. So Li Pengli was made a commoner and banished to the country of Shenyang in 116 BC. His sovereignty was abolished and his land was reclaimed by the Emperor Jing. And the earliest serial killer on record has no name. I know. What a letdown. This is what happened in ancient Rome in the Roman Republic. Several Roman men died in what was believed to be a plague until a servant woman revealed that they had been poisoned by a conspiracy of matrons. 2 patrician women arrested admitted to preparing concoctions but claimed that they were medical. When they drank themselves to prove it at their own suggestion, they died immediately. A total of 170 matrons were arrested. Their act was regarded as a prodigy and suggested madness rather than a villainous intent. Claimed 90 plus victims.
We should not be praising serial killers, but when remembering them, people usually think about our century or the 20th century. But this is not the case. They have always existed, and they will always exist. These, you probably never heard of any of these. Neither have I, for doing research. And they are easily forgotten. So remember, these were the 10 first serial killers of the world, on record, of course. And it astonishes me how 40% of the crimes of these killings were in Rome and 20% in France. And what's also eerie, if you haven't noticed, is of the 2 guys from France, both of them had the same first name, Jill. There was Jill Garnier and Jill de Ray. They're both French, which both have the same first name. And 2 of the other guys who killed in the Holy Roman Empire were both German. The first name, Peter. Now that is truly creepy. Subscribe.